Former President Jimmy Carter plans to be the keynote speaker at a Muslim convention in Detroit this Friday. According to the Toledo Blade, the Islamic Society of North America, or ISNA, is hosting the event. CBN News has reported that ISNA is the nation's largest Muslim group with ties to the Muslim Brotherhood. ISNA leader Mohammed Magid has also been an advisor to the Obama administration. This year's conference is about elevating Muslim American culture. Speakers will offer ideas for advancing Islam in America over the next 5 years.
The annual Islamic Society of North America conference wrapping up today with a very famous speaker. Former President Jimmy Carter addressed the crowd in downtown Detroit just a couple of hours ago. 7 Action News reporter Tara Edwards has the story.
It's an opportunity Fayez Samad couldn't pass up. A chance to meet the 39th President of the United States in person.
It's great that he's getting involved, you know what I'm saying? And I'm really excited to see him here because I've never seen him before.
And he's not alone. Thousands of Muslim Americans packed inside Cobo Center to hear Jimmy Carter speak today at the Islamic Society of North America's annual convention. This year, it's in Detroit.
This is a huge event. There's people coming in from literally all around the country, and everyone's super excited about it.
President Carter addressed the crowd about a number of issues, particularly the historic need for religious communities to mobilize against discrimination and violence that is directed toward girls and women throughout the world.
It's an absolute honor. It's an absolute honor. It's great. I mean, when we can get people from other communities, especially non-Muslims, addressing the issues that we're dealing with, it's an honor.
President Jimmy Carter has a very unique perspective on world issues as it is, just given the Carter Center and their work kind of all over the world, particularly in a lot of developing countries, in the Middle East and in the Muslim world. I think he has some insight on a lot of things happening on the ground, a lot of the progress that's been made, but still a lot of the progress that needs to be made.
President Carter and his wife have traveled to 145 countries, and he's building an interfaith coalition to alleviate what he calls unconscionable human suffering. Today, he invited Muslim leaders at the convention to sign a declaration for peaceful communities.
Generations of rise, elevating Muslim American culture.
Check the bags, you guys.
Right here. Yes. Video message from Obama right here in the living room. Don't be late. It's going to start at 9 o'clock sharp. And that's not Muslim time. That's Muslim time, 9 o'clock sharp. And the next session will also be in this hall, and then we're going to have the musician at 9 o'clock sharp. Organization, promoting respect and equality of women. This will conclude our session. Jazakumullah. Thank you all so much. May Allah bless you. Thank you for coming, and we hope you've been having a wonderful time so far.
We will have this declaration signed by thousands and thousands of people around the world. We'll put it on our website. Join us. Thank you.
The next session will start in 5 minutes in this hall right here. Radiating Beauty, Sheikh Omar Suleiman, Sheikh Nasser Jannah, Sheikh Zainab, please be here, inshallah.
And we have a full-time office in Gaza as well. And my staff members remained in Gaza during the terrible bombardment that ended just a few days ago. And they were there also in 2008, 2009, 2012, when Gaza was destroyed to a major degree. But we believe that peace can come to the Middle East, and the Carter Center wants to be deeply involved in reaching out to all elements that can bring peace to the Palestinians and justice to them, give them a homeland, and then have peace with Israel. The Carter Center has a second effort, and that is with freedom and democracy. I mentioned to the earlier meeting that we have conducted 98 troubled elections on earth, and two of them were in the largest Islamic country in the world, that is Indonesia. We were there when Indonesian people first adopted democracy, and we were there 5 years later when they instituted the direct election of a president. So we're still working on democracy and freedom, not only in Indonesia, but in many other Islamic countries. The third thing that we do is health care, and I mentioned that to them at luncheon, and that's one of our major goals in life. The Carter Center has an annual budget of about $100 million cash, and we get more than that in contributions of medicine that we take to individual villages and homes to treat people for diseases that are no longer known in the developed world, even the countries that are developed as far as Egypt and Syria and so forth. And this is the third thing that we do. But what I'd like to talk to you this afternoon about is about human rights. Every year for the last 20 or 25 years, the Carter Center has sponsored a forum or a conference on human rights. And we have various subjects that we adopt. Imam Majid was with us at our last meeting last year and helped us to evolve the principles on which the Carter Center will be working for many years, hand in hand, in partnership with all of you in this audience and all those who belong to this wonderful organization. And it addresses the horrendous abuse of women and girls around the world. This is the most terrible human rights violation on earth, and it's basically ignored or condoned by the leaders in many countries, and we want to turn that around and give women the equal rights they need and they should enjoy. When I was a boy, I grew up on an isolated farm in Georgia. It was during the time of racial segregation, or a better expression, racial discrimination. My family didn't have any white neighbors. All of our neighbors were African American. All of my playmates were African American boys. And I worked with them in the fields, and I was able to play baseball with them and go to the creek to fish and to go to hunt. My life was shaped by those people. I wrote a book called An Hour Before Daylight. And at the end of the book, I tried to express, to name the 5 people, other than my mother and daddy, who shaped my life. Of those five people who shaped my life, only 2 of them were white. The others were African American. And it was from that that I learned about the terrible, affliction on people who are feeling the blight of discrimination, and also the affliction of those who impose discrimination on other people. And I know that many of you have felt this need in your own lives, particularly since 9/11, to be treated equally as American citizens in this great country. But one of the greatest blights is the one I mentioned earlier, that is against women and girls. And one of the justifications for the discrimination against black people was a misinterpretation of verses in the Holy Bible. And people who were racist would select certain scripture to say it's written in God's Word that black people are inferior to whites. We all know now that that was a false interpretation. And one of the reasons for discrimination against females in this world is a misinterpretation of Holy Scriptures about the treatment of women and girls. Let me give you a few facts. Let me give you a few facts that are almost impossible to believe. The Carter Center is in Atlanta, Georgia. Every month in Atlanta, between 200 and 300 girls are brought in to the United States against their will and sold as slaves into sexual service. The reason that Atlanta is the #1 place in America for this crime is that we have the largest and busiest airport in America. And many of the passengers who come into Atlanta come from the Southern Hemisphere, where the passenger skin is either brown or black. And the brothel owners in Atlanta and in the surrounding southeastern states can purchase a brown or black-skinned girl for $1,000. And they are sold into slavery in the United States of America to be prostitutes. The New York Times had an article earlier this year that showed that the average brothel or house of ill repute nets $33,000 a week, in Atlanta. And the total income is $293 million a year from the sex trade in Atlanta, Georgia. More than almost 3 times as much as the total income from drug trade. The two most revered institutions in America are our university system, which is a great one, and our military. 1 out of every 5 girls who enrolls in an American university will be sexually assaulted before she finishes 4 years of college. And the reason for this is that the presidents of the colleges and the deans of the colleges do not want to admit that sexual assaults take place on their college campuses. So they advise the girl against making a legal issue against the rapists who have attacked them even on the college campuses. We're trying to change that, but it's going to be slow in coming about. The other greatest institution that Americans revere is our military. And in the military, sexual assaults are perhaps even greater. Year before last, there were 26,000 recorded cases of sexual assault in the military. 26,000. Only 3,000 of those ever resulted in a case being brought against the criminal who did this act. That's about 1%. That still goes on. And now, particularly since my book came out, the Congress is trying to move on these 2 items to reduce the sexual assault of women and girls, particularly girls, on college campuses and in the military. The racial discrimination that I mentioned, first of all, lasted about 100 years after the Civil War, when slavery was ended in this country. But let me point out that slavery has not ended in this country. The United States Congress has now required the United States State Department to make an annual report. In addition to what I just described about the Atlanta airport, the State Department estimates that there are now in the United States of America 60,000 people living in human bondage, slaves in the United States of America. These kind of things grieve me very much, but I realize that the same problem exists in other nations and other problems as well. Girls in many countries are afflicted by the practice of delivering them by their parents into marriage when they're as young as 7 or 8 or 12 years old. Last year, there were 14 million girls forced into marriage before they reach legal age. This goes on, and most societies accept it, and it needs to be changed. Another very serious problem is genital mutilation, where girls at a very young age are afflicted with an operation by a woman usually who's called a cutter, who with a razor blade or some such instrument partially destroys the sexual organs of a little girl. This has been outlawed by the United Nations General Assembly twice, and most countries have laws against it, including Egypt, which is probably the country overseas that I visit most. In Egypt, at this moment, despite the law against it, 90% of every female living has had her sexual organs cut or mutilated. And throughout many countries in Africa, this practice still exists. The problem is that many people misinterpret the scriptures as requiring these kinds of things, child marriage and genital mutilation. This is completely false. One of our greatest allies in this effort is the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar University. Al-Azhar University in Cairo has 120,000 students, and the Grand Imam is looked on by many people as a spiritual leader, as you know, of the Sunni Muslims. He's working very closely with us and has prepared a document that shows that nowhere in the Quran is there any mandate that women be treated inferior to men. In a few minutes, we're going to sign the document. And I'd just like to quote three things from the Holy Quran. First of all, in the Quran, 4.1 verse, men and women are created equally from one soul. That's from the Holy Scripture. Quran, verse 9.71. Relationships should be mutual friendship and supporting one another in righteousness between men and women. And the Prophet Muhammad is quoted as saying, the best among you are those who are best to their wives. It's not only